first, Samson Okunlola to Miami, the big-time offensive tackle, #1 OT in America on Sports Illustrated. The Canes grab another one. And earlier in the day, Javian Toviano out of Texas commits to LSU, and he's an SI 99 defensive back who we project as more of a nickel type at the next level, 6 foot, 185 pounds. We got to dig into the LSU Tigers, red hot under Brian Kelly. But first, we've got to start with the hottest program in college football recruiting. LSU's hot. Utah is very hot. Oregon will have a very fun close. Texas A&M won't go down without a fight. Auburn is going to do well under Hugh Freeze. 3 flips in the last week for the Tigers. But it is the Miami Hurricanes, the unquestionable hottest recruiting program in the country. Not only do they have the #1 class in the ACC, they've got a top 5 class nationally. The only programs with as many star power laden recruits in their class. It's really one, Alabama. Alabama has 9 SI 99 recruits. Miami, Georgia, Texas, Notre Dame, all now sitting with 8 SI 99ers on the verbal commitment list, of course, with Okunlola joining the fold for the U. Not only does it help Miami have the top class, runaway top class in the ACC over Clemson and Florida State, it now solidifies one of the biggest weaknesses on that 2022 Miami roster, the offensive line. Okunlola is the icing on the cake of an elite runaway #1 offensive line haul in the class of 2023. Okunlola, theoretically your left tackle of the future. Francis Mauigoa, a fellow top 15 overall recruit, your right tackle, or maybe an interior prospect in the future. And the list rounds out with IMG Academy's Antonio Tripp. It rounds out with a former international recruit who's now playing his ball in South Florida, Frankie Tilialao, 6'5", 315 pounds. And then on the interior, Tommy Kinsler from up in Ocala, Florida, Trinity Catholic High School, 6'6", 330. He's another interior type. So you've basically brought in now, if you're Miami, a 5-man offensive line. And some of these guys are going to be called upon pretty darn early in Coral Gables. But the biggest news of the day is the addition of Okunlola. The final 4 ahead of this decision was, of course, Miami, Florida, Michigan State, and Alabama. And really, this was interesting. This was framed for a very long time as, hey, Miami's the team to beat. Really, since Okunlola took his summer official visit to Coral Gables, Miami was viewed as the team to beat. So the question from June to December, a 6-month span, was really who could start to close that gap? And as the months wore on and we got closer to the end of the college football season, there was a school that emerged as the clear challenger to the Miami Hurricanes. It was right up the road, up I-75. The Florida Gators appeared to be the primary contenders. Not only did they bring in Samson Okunlola and his family for a visit late in the cycle, they followed it up with a second visit, an official visit, to where now your family comes and it's 48 hours on the school's dime. Remember, the Miami trip was a summer official visit. Florida got the last official visit just the weekend or 2 weekends prior to National Signing Day, prior to Okunlola's verbal commitment. So Florida very much appeared to be the primary competition for Miami, so much so that we were really discussing this recruitment in the last week or so in particular as a coin flip. This one could easily have leaned towards Florida, or Miami could have held off Florida after holding such a long lead for such a long time. It should be noted that Okunlola did take an unofficial visit to Miami during the season as well. So he did get back down to Miami one more time. So 2 visits to each campus overall, but 2 in a row to Gainesville. And it really kind of signaled the true competition for Okunlola. Yet and still, once we got into that 24 to 36 hour range away from the verbal commitment that went down on Thursday afternoon, it was actually Michigan State that started to create some buzz. Was this just a last-ditch effort at momentum? Was it a true swing? Or was it a smokescreen? Now, I don't have that answer because we're just minutes, away or minutes behind that verbal commitment that Okunlola just made to the U. So I'd have to dig in on that a little bit more. But Mel Tucker and Michigan State were coming late in the game here for Okunlola. MSU did host him for an official visit in those summer months, right around the time Alabama and Miami hosted him for official visits. So totally fascinating. When's the last time Alabama really wanted a kid? And the other three schools all held more buzz at different points. And the kid, of course, the kid commits to one of the four not named Alabama. So Bama was in it. They got an official in the summer months. Could not get that return trip to Tuscaloosa. So Samson Okunlola comes off the board to the University of Miami. So what makes him special? Why is he the number one offensive tackle in the country on Sports Illustrated? Well, when we did those preseason rankings, it was really about everything. He checked every single box in our evaluation. So naturally, when we're talking about distinguishing the best players at a position, the frame and the athleticism has to be checked in Sharpie. There has to be no true question marks from those two standpoints. And you could just Google a photo of Samson Okunlola and know from a frame standpoint, yes, that box is checked. Listed at 6'5", 305 pounds, carries it incredibly well. He walks around like he is 270, 265. He's got some cut in his muscle at 300 plus pounds as a high school senior. That is not something very common in our experience in tracking the future of college football. So his frame absolutely checks out. He's a wrestling champion. He's got that physical lower half built in the midsection as well. Lower body dominant, really, type of player, but he's more chiseled and cut up top, which means he's got some room to put on a little bit more weight on top of his a great elite frame. So I think that's really interesting in Okunlola's look and build. So Samson Okunlola, of course, still room to grow. We'll see how that works out going forward. And if you talk about, the athleticism part of it, right? I said frame and athleticism both have to really be on 10 if you're going to be considered number one at your position, at any position that we rank. Other ways to show that athleticism has to kind of aid the conversation, right? So obviously you watch Okunlola play on tape and you're fascinated, right? He's up at Thayer Academy in Brockton, Massachusetts, dominating folks. He looks like a grown man out there against children. He can get to the second level with ease. His kick step, his slide, his reach blocking, his ability to pull and play in space, elite across the board, dominant against lesser competition. Again, no knock against lesser competition, but if you're going to be a high-level recruit, you better go dominate that lesser competition when the film turns on. Samson checks those boxes in Sharpie. So when you're looking at him versus the other elite tackles or other elite linemen, period, right? Caden Proctor, Francis Mauigoa, among the very, very best, how could he further separate himself? Because from a competitive standpoint, everybody else is playing better players, right? Mauigoa's at IMG Academy, Proctor's in Iowa in the trenches, right? They're playing better competition. So how can Okunlola project a little bit more safely despite playing worse competition? Well, where else can we pull data from? Where else can we consider overall athleticism beyond what we just see on tape and in drills and all these other things where Okunlola just looks relatively effortless as an offensive tackle? How about the wrestling mat? If there's a sport, it used to be, hey, any other sport, we don't really like that. In football, we want you to specialize. And then it became play something else, right? Play something else, keep your body in shape, keep those muscles kind of laxed, right? Doing different things, not football year round type of activities. It became not so good for you. But it used to be, if I was a high school coach and my high school coach was like this, if my football players are done with football, they need to be doing one of two things in the offseason: running track or wrestling. Okunlola is an elite wrestler, also threw in track and field, by the way, if you're wondering kind of the balance there. He did throw the shot and the discus earlier in his high school career, but more recently, a a state champion, won the New England ISL Independent Sports League in the winter of 2021. So a literal wrestling champion on top of all of this. And it correlates on tape. The leverage is there. The movement skills are there. The consistency, the motor is there. We also get another sample of that from Okunlola on defense. He is a very high motor defensive lineman, and he showed a lot more of that as a senior this fall in 2022. So when you're talking about number one at your position, what all goes into that? It is, are you the prototypical blindside protector or are you not? And we were really close between Okunlola, Proctor, and Francis Mauigoa. We ended up moving Mauigoa to interior. We moved him to a guard projection because his frame is a little bit more compact than that of Okunlola and Caden Proctor in particular. But these guys all ended up ranking very closely in that SI 99. Okunlola, number 5 overall, and the number 1 offensive tackle overall in the class of 23. Caden Proctor, number 9 overall, so the number 2 offensive tackle, so 2 in the top 10. And then Mauigoa came in right after that at number 13 overall and the number 1 interior offensive line projection. So 3 offensive linemen in the top 13 overall. And here's the interesting part about that. It's not a great O-line class. It absolutely is not a great offensive line class, but the top of it is very, 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 very good between these 3 in particular, Okunlola, Proctor, and Francis Mauigoa. Of course, Okunlola and Mauigoa, teammates in the future at the University of Miami. So that alone is quite fascinating. You got to go down, if you're wondering, you got to go down to number 29 overall, Javen Williams, to get the next offensive lineman that we ranked at Sports Illustrated. So when we're profiling that number 1 guy, you better be that true blindside protector. I think that hurt in the perception of evaluating Mauigoa, although everywhere else those boxes are unbelievable for him. I think he actually has more day one stuff than Okunlola from a physicality standpoint, especially given the competition that Mauigoa faced week in, week out over the last couple of years at IMG Academy. But Okunlola had more length, more upside to fill out his frame and truly anchor the blind side and the left side of an offensive line. Proctor, bigger, more physical. He's got some swing in his game too. He reminds me a little bit of Jedrick Wills, who's now playing for the Cleveland Browns, former first-round pick out of Alabama. He reminds me of Jedrick Wills, where you can put him at left tackle, but man, a right tackle projection for Caden Proctor is cash money. I know a lot of people compare him to Tristan Wirfs because he's, committed to Iowa and all that fun stuff. But I see more Jedrick Wills in his game to where he could be a swing tackle prospect, but right tackle might be his absolute home. Very wide-bodied, wide-based offensive lineman. He's got some inside ability, in my opinion, there as well if you need it. So he could play 4 offensive line spots wherever Caden Proctor signs on Wednesday. That will be really interesting to follow going forward. So Okunlola off the board to Miami. Huge deal, huge group and haul for Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal, the offensive line coach. Cristobal kind of takes away from Mirabal's perceptional prowess, fairly or not, right? Because Mario Cristobal, known recruiter, known offensive line guy, so people assume it's all about him. But Alex Mirabal, by the way, as close a confidant as Mario has at any position on his Miami staff, those two literally go back to their childhood in South Miami. Alex Mirabal can absolutely recruit. He did it at Oregon. He's doing it now at the U. Mirabal can absolutely recruit on the offensive line. And one of the offensive line commitments to Miami had a great tweet. I'm pulling it up right now, so don't mind the clicking sounds. But Antonio Tripp, the other IMG Academy offensive lineman committed to Miami, says it's the Great Wall of Mirabal. He said, quote, "The Great Wall of Mirabal is complete. Ain't nothing left to do but work, fam," at Samson Okunlola, end quote. So yeah, there's a lot of excitement for Miami. Look, 5-7, missed a bowl. One of the biggest disappointments of any program on the field in 2022, and everyone there knows it. So you expected this kind of rebuttal from the recruiting standpoint under Mario Cristobal, and that's exactly what we're getting at Miami. 5 offensive linemen on board, 2 of them in the top 13 overall of the player rankings. And oh, by the way, neither is the highest ranked Miami commitment, because Cortmani McClain, the number 2 overall player and number 1 overall defensive player and defensive back, committed to the U back in October. So the top of this Miami class is really special. And this caps what has been an unbelievable recruiting run for Miami. Just the other day, Ruben Bain jumps on board, another SI 99 recruit out of Miami Central. You want production in a pass rusher? Ruben Bain has 47 sacks and counting in his high school career. Oh, by the way, that's only over the last 2 years. So from the beginning of the 2021 season till now, 47 sacks. And he's playing in Miami, by the way. This is a Miami Central kid. He's playing against Northwestern and some of these great programs, Booker T. Washington, Edison, Norland, down in the Miami area. Oh, and oh, by the way, against IMG Academy, Bain had 3 sacks. So this Miami run has been really special. There's other prospects who jumped on board with verbal commitments just in the month of December as well. You've got Christopher Johnson, the running back from Dillard High School in Fort Lauderdale, former Rutgers commitment. This is a speed demon. This is a 10-4, 10-5, 100-meter dash player who has some gadget to him. He can play running back. He can play slot. Surely looks like he will factor into the return game as well. He committed December 11th. 1 week before that, Miami flipped North Carolina defensive line commitment Joshua Horton from Langston Hughes High School in the Atlanta area. This is a state champion program with an elite defense that allowed like 70 points this year. Horton was the anchor, true interior prospect on the D line there. He was the anchor of that unit. And then just for good measure, the day before, Marcelius Pulliam out of Sandy Creek High School in Georgia committed to the U. So Miami has been absolutely rolling on the recruiting trail, big time gets, but also those depth pieces to fill out in the class of 23. And that's what you need when you're overhauling an entire roster. So Miami now sits at 24 verbal commitments, number 1 class there in the ACC after Samson Okunlola jumps on board to complete an elite offensive class and a more elite offensive line haul.